another edition of the weekly Chaburah. At this time, I'd like to thank, like I always do, Chazaq for hosting and sponsoring, and Torah Anytime for taking the videos and posting the videos online so we can be Chazaq other people in learning Torah. So thank you, both of you. This week's Parshiyot are two, obviously, Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. Acharei Mot has 28 mitzvot, and Kedoshim has 51 mitzvot. So Baruch Hashem, between the two, there are 79 mitzvot. And obviously, each mitzvah in itself is big enough and broad enough that you could spend weeks upon weeks learning each one of the mitzvot. So 79 mitzvot in 1 week's worth of studying for the Parsha is a daunting task. But you take it one mitzvah at a time, you study a few mitzvahs here and a few mitzvahs there, and every year you just keep adding, and hopefully you'll have a tremendous amount of knowledge in all the mitzvot. Now, so Acharei Mot, I just want to mention just a few things that Acharei Mot talks about, and then we're going to get to our main topic in Kedoshim, which is in Kedoshim TU. So one of the mitzvot is that about Aaron's two children that died because they actually brought incense into the Kodesh HaKodashim, and they weren't told to do so. So they were nifter in Parshiyos before, but in this week's Parsha, Kadosh Baruch Hu and Acharei Mot tells Aaron and that he should tell his children and Kohanim in the future that you can't just go into the Kodesh HaKodashim whenever you want. You need, once a year, Aaron HaKohen went in. Moshe Rabbeinu, though, was able to go in whenever he wanted. Whenever he needed to ask Hashem a question, Moshe Rabbeinu was allowed to go in whenever he wanted into the Kodesh HaKodashim, but Aaron only went in once a year on Yom Kippur. So it was a warning there that Aaron and the future generations of Kohanim should not go into the Kodesh HaKodashim in order that it shouldn't happen to them what happened to Aaron's two sons, even though he had two remaining. So that's one of the first things that the Parsha talks about. It also talks about certain forbidden relationships, which are actually discussed which is actually read on Yom Kippur by Mincha time, and about forbidden relationships. It also talks about the mitzvah of do not give one child to Molech, and there's a bunch of other mitzvot in Parshas Acharei Mot. What I want to focus on is a mitzvah that is mentioned in the words Kedoshim Tihu. Kedoshim Tihu, Hashem says, you should be holy. Be a holy nation. Now, obviously, if you follow all the mitzvos in the Torah, you will automatically be a holy person. If somebody followed all the mitzvahs of the Torah, he will be obviously a holy person. And I don't think anyone would disagree that if someone who follows all the mitzvahs in the Torah, he becomes obviously uplifted and he does the Ratzon Hashem, and that's very special. Yet, Hashem says, besides for following all my mitzvos, there's something called Kedoshim Tihu. Be exceedingly holy, because I, Hashem, am holy, and I want you to emulate me, Hashem says, therefore you should also be holy. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean, Kedoshim Tihu, that you should be holy? What does that refer to? So, I just want to mention also that all the mitzvos that were given to the Klal Yisrael, to the Jewish people, were actually given in groups. I don't know how the groups worked, but different groups would come in, and many different people from the Sanhedrin, Moshe Rabbeinu himself many times, but there were different groups that were brought in. Here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, I want you to gather all of Klal Yisrael, that they should be there all at the same time when we discuss these mitzvot. Now, the question is, does it refer to all the mitzvot in Parshas Kedoshim, or does it refer to something particular called Kedoshim Tihu, that you should become holy and that you should be a holy nation? So I want to mention 4 stories. I have 4, maybe even 5 stories if we can get to it. Amazing stories that refer to 2 aspects of Kedoshim Tihu. Story number 1 actually took place a few years ago in Eretz Yisrael. I saw it in a sefer called Aleinu L'Shabeach. I saw it in that particular sefer, and it's really a magnificent, very special story. And he actually brings it down, Reb Zilberstein Shlita, he brings it down in a different pasuk of what it means to be holy, what it means that we should serve Hashem in holiness. So he says over a story like this: my wife happens to be a sheitel macher. I'm not advertising to wear sheitels or not to wear sheitels. I'm not getting involved in the halachic ramifications. if you are allowed, should you not wear them, should you wear mitpachat? That's not what this discussion is, but the story is an incredible story. And I do remember when the question in the story was raised among all of Klal Yisrael. I don't remember how many years ago, I think it was around 10 years ago, 8 years ago. There was a question about Indian hair that arose in the Jewish community, that certain hairs that in the shaitels were coming from India, and being that in Indian customs they would use hair for their avodah zarah, was the hair in question might have been used for avodah zarah. So there was a big debate going around America and in Eretz Yisrael about human hair. Can it be used? Can it not be used? Besides for the issue that Rabbi Yosef has in general with peyot, we're not discussing that, like I said. So there was a certain school in Bnei Brak where most of the teachers actually wore mitpachats, they wore actually head coverings, and there were a few teachers, very few, that actually wore peyot, that wore actual shaitels. And there was one teacher in particular that actually wore every day a shaitel to school. She wore a shaitel to her class. One day she comes in wearing a mitpachat. She was not wearing the shaitel. A second day she came in not wearing a shaitel. A third day she was wearing a mitpachat, a head covering. And the girls in the class were wondering after a while, what is it about our Mora that she used to wear a shaitel and now she comes in only wearing a mitpachat? So one of the girls had the courage and in the middle of class raised her hand and said, Mora, can I ask you a question? The Mora said, of course. Why are you wearing a mitpachat instead of the normal shaitel that you used to wear to school? So the teacher said, the Mora said, let me tell you why. And then she went on to explain the issue with the Indian hair and the question that arose. And she said over that Rebbe Yashiv paskin at that particular time, that until he's mevarer, until he does the research that's needed, everyone should be very careful not to wear shaitels, to find out all the ramifications and questions that arose regarding this Indian hair. And he'll decide within a few weeks or whatever it takes. Till then, everyone should be careful not to wear peyot. So a girl gets up and says, Mora, can I ask you a question? And Mora said, yes. So the girl said, Mora, I have a question for you. Can you please repeat over what Rebbe Yashiv said about wearing a wig? Can you repeat it over? So this teacher, this Mora thought that why did the girl want to know? Because she's going to go home and tell her mother. So the Mora repeated over what Rebbe Yashiv said, that Rebbe Yashiv said that until he's mavarer about the wigs, people should be careful not to wear wigs. And this girl said, thank you so much, Mora. And she sat down and she proceeded to take off a wig that was on her head. This girl, Nebuch, had cancer. And no one in the class knew she had it. She was only in 6th grade. They made her a special wig. It was embarrassing. She didn't want anyone to know. So she took off the wig in front of the rest of the class because Rebbe Yashiv said that a person should be careful. And she sat the whole day not wearing a wig. So Reb Zilberstein wanted to say to us, and he says in the story, that you see that a simple girl has such emunat chachamim, and the love that if a gadol hadar says something, even if it means that her whole life will change because of it, because people are going to know now, and the embarrassment of sitting in the whole day without a payah, without a shaitel, would be embarrassing for her bald head. But because Rebbe Yashiv paskined it, she decided she is going to take off that wig. So that's a very beautiful story, and he brings it down on the words of Ki Kadosh Atem, that you are a holy nation, that we are Am Kadosh, and therefore regarding Kedoshim to you, I wanted to mention that story. That's one story. I also want to mention a story about what it means for the eyes, because we're going to discuss what it means a person to be makbid on Shmirat Hanayim. Part of Kedoshim Tiyu, the rabbis teach us, is a person should keep away from things that are in the nature of arayot. Arayas, things that are relationship oriented, where a person has to stay away from certain things. Therefore, Shmiras Hanayim falls into the category watching one's eyes. So before I get into the situations of arayut, of watching Shmiras Hanayim, a person watching his eyes, I just want to mention a story about what it means to watch one's eyes. I had a Rebbe many years ago, and I'm not going to discuss now how he became my Rebbe, but it's an amazing, amazing story how I accepted this particular individual as my Rebbe. Very holy man. His name was Rav Shlomo Brevda Zatzal. A big tzaddik, a very big mashgiach, a tremendous, tremendous, brilliant man when it came to Musar and understanding the human intellect. And his shiurim were very, very, very popular when I was growing up. He really lived in Eretz Yisrael. He was an American. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, and then he had to come to America the last 5-10 years of his life and stay here because of medical reasons. But he was a very, very holy man, and I would make it my duty, my job, to not miss his shiurim whenever he gave them, whether it's in Brooklyn or in the 5 towns. I always attended. But when I started listening to him, he actually started giving shiurim in Eretz Yisrael when I started listening to him. And then afterwards, he moved to America. I actually followed, him, his move in the sense of learning and going to his classes. So he said over a story that when he was 17 years old, he was a student in the famous yeshiva of Ponevezh, a famous yeshiva, one of the Harvard of yeshivot, Lahavdil. And today it's still one of the top yeshivas in the world. But then it was like known. Rav Shach was the Rosh Yeshiva, Shmuel Rozovsky, big Gedolim, big Rabbanim were the Rosh Yeshivot in this yeshiva, and they still are. Rav Pravarsky, Rav Edelman, there was many, many big Gedolim in this yeshiva. One of the big mashgichim of Klal Yisrael in the past 100-something years was the mashgiach in Ponevezh. His name was Rabbi Chazaq Levenstein. The mashgiach, Rabbi Chazaq Levenstein. So this Reb Brevda was a student of Reb Chazaq, and he says over the story once, this is the story, an amazing story he says over. He says, when I was 17 years old, I was a mashgiach in this yeshiva, and there was a wedding that was taking place in Yerushalayim from one of the students in Ponevezh. So they rented a bus, whether the chassan rented it or the yeshiva rented it, I don't know, but they rented a bus to take them to Yerushalayim. And there was a whole busload of students that went to Yerushalayim to go in for this wedding. And Rav Shlomo Brevda says that on the way back from this wedding, Rav Chazaq was sitting 2 rows in front of him. He was sitting 2 rows back. And Rav Chazaq was sitting next to one of the Rosh Yeshivas in the yeshiva. It doesn't say who, I don't remember, because I heard this story 30 years ago. And he was sitting, he falls asleep. The wedding was over at 10 o'clock at night. They were on the way back. They were tired, and he falls asleep on his head on the window. He wakes up a little bit later in a state of panic, Rav Shlomo Brevda says, because he wasn't sure if he missed his stop. And then he sees the Reb Chazaq, the mashgiach, is not sitting in the normal seat that he sits in. He wasn't sitting there. So he was wondering, how could it be? Because he looked out the window and he knows that Reb Chazaq's stop is at least 2-3 more stops ahead, because there was a certain route that the buses always took when they went from the yeshiva, from the weddings to Ponevezh. It wasn't the first wedding they'd been to, so there was a route. So he sees Rav Chazaq's not in his seat, so he's wondering where Rav Chazaq goes. Then he leans over, he gets up a little bit, he sees Rav Chazaq sitting in his seat, bent over, leaning, looking downwards in his seat, as if he lost something on the floor, like as if he was looking for something. So he gets up, Rav Shlomo Brevda, to help him. So as he gets up to help him, the Rosh Yeshiva that was sitting next to Rav Chazaq says, he doesn't need help, it's fine, he didn't lose anything. And he sits back down, no problem. Shlomo Brevda sits back down. 2 stops later, or a few minutes later, Rav Chazaq sits up straight, continues the conversation he had with this Rosh Yeshiva, and then gets off a few minutes later. 2 stops after that, gets off. So Rav Shlomo Brevda was very curious. He said, I was curious to know what was the mashgiach doing that he was leaning all the way downwards as if he was looking for something on the floor. So he moves in, he slides in next to the seat of this Rosh Yeshiva who wasn't getting off yet either. And neither was Rav Shlomo Brevda for a few more stops. Rav Chazaq's stop was a few stops earlier. And he asks the Rosh Yeshiva, what was it that Rav Chazaq was doing that he was bent down as if he was looking for something? So he says, let me tell you why Rav Chazaq was leaning all the way down. He said, there was a movie theater that opened up on the route that they took all the time. The bus takes a certain route. This rental bus takes a certain route when they drop off different people. And this movie theater opened a few weeks ago, and Rav Chazaq has been to 1 or 2 weddings since then. And the lights of the movie theater would flash into the bus The lights at night in the movie theater would flash into the bus as the bus was passing. And it would cause, sometimes you pass certain lights and you see if you're trying to fall asleep in a bus or a car at night and you pass certain bridges, the lights shine in and wakes you. Chazaq was worried that the lights of this movie theater would shine into the bus and would cause a certain amount of timtum, contamination, that he got some kind of enjoyment or noticing of the lights of the movie theater. Therefore, he put his head down that he shouldn't even be affected by the lights of a movie theater that flashed in. Now you think to yourself, it's a little wild, right? Come on, let's be honest. So I will tell you that my son, my own particular son, is old gesund sein, young, he's only 18 years old, very makpid to never touch an iPhone. He won't even touch it. He sits and learns all day and night. Big tzaddik, big talmid chacham. I don't want to give ayin hara or anything, but he's very makpid never to touch an iPhone. You should know that even when I get a phone call, he'll say to me, Abba, and I'm not near my phone. Say, Abba, should I pick up the phone? I'll keep it out of aim. I go, no, don't touch the phone. Now, why I have it, that's a different question. That's a good question too. But he is very careful, and I'm proud of him that he doesn't touch it. And he's very makpid. Even a flip phone, he's very careful not to carry with him while he's in yeshiva. When he comes home, for every 2-3 weeks, my wife needs to reach him. Otherwise, he uses the pay phone. He has a flip phone. He keeps it in the dorm, but he uses the pay phone in yeshiva when he wants to call my wife and call me to wish me good night. He's makpid. So I want to tell you there is something to being very careful not to pass by something that can cause timtum halev. So those are two stories. One story about Kedoshim TU, about the girl in general, what it means to be a holy nation. A second story, what it means about watching one's eyes in the sense of timtum. But what I want to discuss now is a story about actually shmiras einayim. Person guarding his eyes. Kedoshim TU. Watching one's eyes. It's not an easy topic. And it could be daunting and it can be very difficult. But most gedolim, most rabbanim, most people that are on a high spiritual level, they're careful. They're careful not to, many gedolim don't have women come into them. Some do, some don't. I'm not here to judge. But many gedolim, especially the Eretz Yisrael gedolim, the Chazanishes of the world, the Rav Shachs of the world, the Stiplers of the world, they were very makpid, not even to read a handwriting from a lady that actually gave a thing. It had to be, I know the Baba Sali, if I'm not mistaken, was very careful not to read handwriting from women. So a person has to be very careful not to, at least on their level, how they were careful. So I'm not here to judge anybody, chas v'shalom, but there is a very big holy inyan called shmiras einayim, guarding one's eyes. So I just want to tell you two stories about guarding one's eyes. I went for blood work a few months ago. Nothing dangerous. I went for blood work to a doctor in Forest Hills. The person that actually checks the blood is a very, very popular doctor, I was told. She's a woman doctor, but she checks the blood. In other words, the blood gets taken by a male nurse or a woman, but it gets taken by a nurse, and she oversees the blood work, and then she comes in and she tells you, what it is, what she sees. Her name is Savleta. I don't even remember her name, but she's a very big blood doctor in Regal Park, a Bukharian lady. So I came to do some blood work. I needed to check for diabetes, whatever it was, I needed to go. So after she checks my blood work, she closes the door. There was a male doctor inside the room that was doing all the typing of what she was telling me. And she tells me these words. She goes, Rabbi, my children are becoming fanatiki. That's what she tells me. They're becoming fanatic. Famous Bukharian word, she's becoming fanatic. So I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how religious this woman is. Who knows what she calls fanatic? Do I know what she calls fanatic? Maybe the fact that they eat kosher. I have no idea what level she's on. I did see mezuzot on the door. She seemed like a very nice person, but I wasn't sure what level religiosity, what she was. So I said, what do you mean they're fanatic? She goes, they're becoming too religious, she tells me. And she's laughing. I saw in her a little joy. She was actually happy to tell it to me. But she was like laughing. I said, what do you call fanatic? She says, my kids are 12. Last year they were 12 and 13 respectively, two boys. And they go to a school called Westchester Hebrew High School. And she tells me that last year we were going to Cancun. And they said to her, Mom, whatever, I don't know how they called her, we can't go on this trip unless we bring only kosher food. I don't care. We're not eating non-kosher cheese or non-kosher salad or a lot of people, I'm not going to mention, I know people that go on vacation. As long as it's not kosher meat, they'll eat it. If it's pizza, dairy, they'll eat it. They'll eat salads. It's not so bad. These children, both of them said, Mom, whatever they called her, I cannot go. We cannot go unless there's completely kosher food from A to Z with us. Otherwise, we can't go on this trip. Or we're not going to eat from whatever the food that they're serving in wherever we're going. She tells me, I said, wow, I was very impressed. She goes, no, it gets worse, she tells me, but she's laughing. I saw she took pride a little bit. She says, this year, on President's Weekend, whatever the week, we're going also, again, someplace in Cancun, but they don't want to go at all unless I promise them a particular thing. I said, what is it? This is what these two kids, 14 years old, 13 years old, Westchester Hebrew High School is a wonderful place. I don't know if it's on the level of, fanaticnism or very, very yeshivish in certain ways like Panovich or other yeshivas or Lakewood Yeshiva, I don't know. But I was amazed at what these two kids said. They said, we are going to go on this trip because you want us to go, but you have to promise us that you will not make us leave our hotel room. I go, why? So these are what this 14 and 13-year-old boy said. Because of the tzniut, the immodesty that walks around in the hotel lobbies, on the beaches, in the streets, we don't want to be privy to any of this. We don't want to chas v'sholem see any of this. So if you promise us that we don't have to leave the hotel room, we'll come for the 5-6 days that you're going on this trip. So I was amazed by it, to be honest with you, because the purity, the innocentness, the holiness of a 14-year-old, 13-year-old that's going on a major vacation where the parents do not care what they end up seeing. Yet these two boys were so careful that they said, we will go as long as you do not make us leave our hotel room because of immodesty. Very special in my opinion. Everyone could have their own opinion if they felt what level that it was in. And I looked at her and I said, I want to tell you, so this is what bothers you? And she laughs. And I want to tell you, I said, you know what? Zachita, I told her, you merited to have children so holy, so special, so caring. I said, wow, on all of Klal Yisrael, we should have children that are careful like that. That's what I told her. And I said, you should take pride. I said, all your practice, I told her, all the money you make in all your practice is worth it, that you can have 2 children that you could bring up and they could be lights onto Klal Yisrael for this particular type of children that you can bring into the world that could be lights onto the Jewish people. I was very amazed by the story. I got actually very emotional about it also. Anyway, I want to end with a midrash. Okay, now before I say the midrash, I think I said over this vart once before. When Yaakov Avinu met Yosef for the first time, it says for 22 years, he didn't know if Yosef was alive. He didn't know if he had merit to see Yosef alive ever again. And here he comes face to face with Yosef. So we know that he put aside his love for Yosef and he gave it towards Hashem and he said the Shema first. We know that he said Kriya Shema because it came time to say the Shema in the morning. So he channeled all that love that was meant for Yosef and he said, I have to channel it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu first and only then to Yosef. Very, very special. But he says a certain words when he finally talks to Yosef after the Shema. He tells Yosef, Emusa hapam, I can die this time. Now that I've seen your face, that you're still living. Again, Emusa hapam, he tells him, I could die this time, which means like a second time. Like in other words, he died the first time when he thought Yosef was not living. But Emusa hapam, I could die this time, in reality, physically. Now that I've seen your face, you're still living. So the question is, why does it have to say, now that I've seen your face? All it has to say is, I could die this time, that you're still living. Now that I see you're still living, I could die. I could die in peace, knowing that my Yosef is still living. What does it, now that I've seen your face, have to do with anything? So I saw an unbelievable shot. I don't remember. I think Moshe Sternbach brings it down from somewhere. I'm not sure, but I remember seeing this many years ago. Yosef was one of the most beautiful people to ever live. We can't even imagine the beauty of Yosef. And Yosef was being challenged not just by Potiphar's wife, but he was challenged by all the women. That whenever his carriage would ride through the streets of Egypt, women would throw things at him, roses and flowers, just to get his attention, just that he could look up for a second and they could see his face. That would be enough for them. Satisfying enough to see the face of Yosef. And Yosef, people would climb windows, it says, to be higher, in almost miraculous powers of Tumah, to see the face of Yosef HaTzadik, because he was so beautiful. Yet it says Yosef never, ever looked up once. One time somebody threw something at him, it was a chain, and said that I am a daughter of Yaakov, and who was it? It was his wife, right? And therefore he ended up marrying her because he saw the chain, he remembered the chain, she was kidnapped, taken into hostage, she was in Egypt, and that's the only time he even noticed that something was thrown at him. It was a chain with the name of I am from the daughters of Yaakov. Anyway, so Yaakov looks at Yosef and says, now that I've seen your face, that you're still living, I could die. So the Medrash, the Shemach brings this down. He says that if Yosef would have sinned one time in Egypt, one time, by looking or doing something he should not have done, he never would have been able to look at the face of Yaakov ever. He never would have been able to look at his father in the face. Therefore, Yaakov tells Yosef, I could die this time, now that I see your face, that you're still living spiritually. Because I know that if you would have sinned once, you would not have been able to look at my face. Therefore, I could die knowing that you are still the same Yosef HaTzadik, because you were able to look me in the eyes. Because if you would have sinned, you never would have been able to. And therefore, that you're still living doesn't mean physically. It means spiritually. The fact that you're still living spiritually is, for me, a reason that I could leave this world knowing that my legacy with you is intact. So we see again the power of a person of self-control. Self-control is not an easy thing. Not an easy thing. And it's very difficult, especially in the workforce. Especially when you're going out, when you walk into certain neighborhoods, Manhattan, certain places. You should know, my son, one of my children, when I'm in Eretz Yisrael, and I walk with him in the streets, takes off his glasses, and we walk. I walk him, literally with my wife. We walk him, because he doesn't want to be contaminated by what's out there, even in Eretz Yisrael. Now, some might say, wow, that's too much. No, it's not. It's holiness. It's holiness. Person wants to guard his eyes. Guarding your eyes is a difficult thing, but it can be obtained when a person works on it. And the great thing about guarding one's eyes, and I want to tell you this, I take it from me because I've many times worked on myself in guarding my eyes. You feel instant gratification. It's not something that you have to wait a day, a week, a month. Every time you're driving your car, and you know you're driving sitting down the street, and you could easily look at something, not immodest even, a woman passing in the street, and you don't even have bad thoughts, chas v'shalom, but you say to yourself, do not look, focus on the road, try your best not to notice. You feel unbelievable kedusha, unbelievable holiness you feel. It's instant gratification. You start feeling the strength right away, within seconds. You feel powerful. You feel like I've overcome something. And every time you do it, you feel stronger and stronger. So it gets, I don't like the word gets easier, chas v'shalom, but it definitely Hashem sends you matanot, gifts, that a person is able to control himself. And I'm telling you now, it's a very powerful thing. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to say something, maybe, I'm on video, I get it, but I'll say it. Many years ago, I used to go to ball games. I used to go in the name of Kiruv. I used to take kids to basketball games. I used to take to a baseball game. And I used to go under the heading that I'm such a great rabbi and a great Rebbe in the outside world. In Eretz Yisrael, they probably wouldn't think so. But I'm taking my students to basketball games, to baseball games. What a great Rebbe. Now, I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed going to the games because I was a fan too, a Knicks fan, a Rangers fan, whatever it was. So I looked good going to a Met game, taking my students when I probably didn't even notice they were there because I'm busy so into the game. But I used to take, and then I started to get embarrassed. I'm going to be very open with you. Because as we know, in certain stadiums and certain venues, There's dancers, there's Kedoshim music, there's stuff on the screen. Very difficult to be careful. Very difficult to say to yourself, I'm going to go there and be 100% holy. Now, I know there's pictures and videos of rabbis sitting with Gemarot. I'm not getting involved in that. Very special people that would go to a game and open a Gemara just because he had to take his kids. I'm not going there with that. But I do know for many years, a few years already, I stopped going for that reason. Because as much as I want to, do kiruv, should I be sitting there? That's the truth. Should I be sitting there when the music, non-Jewish music, is blaring in your head? People are dancing on the court. You don't know when they're going to start dancing. The people around me sitting there are not dressed the way they should be dressed. People are men, boys and women, they're hugging each other. It's not the issue. I don't belong there. So can I do kiruv with the Sitra Achar? I'm not judging anyone that goes. I'm not judging anyone that takes their kids. I did it for years, 30, 40, 30 years I did it. 25 years I did it. I just made my own, work on myself not to go anymore. Not to go. It's been a few years already, maybe 5, 6, 7 years already that I haven't gone. And believe me, I want to tell you, I'm very proud of myself. And I'm an adult. Wow, you're proud of yourself? No, I am proud of myself that I was able to say to myself, you know what? Stop fooling yourself, Avram. Stop fooling yourself. You want to do kiruv? That's an amazing thing. You shouldn't be sitting there. I shouldn't. Me personally, I'm not going to judge other people. I myself said I should not be sitting there. What message am I sending? What message am I sending my children that they know, they're old enough now, that I went to a game that they wouldn't go to for the same reasons, but I'm going for kiruv? Again, I'm not judging anyone. This is something I took upon myself. And I will tell you, it's very, very satisfying. And it's a very good feeling to know that you have self-control that you have for yourself. So I'm going to end with that. I didn't even get to the next story, which maybe we'll save for another time. It's a story from Reb Masya ben Cheresh of how careful he was. It's Yalkut Shimoni, Parshas Vayechi, if you want to see it. It's Reb Masya ben Cheresh who gouged out his eyes because of a certain situation, but we're not going to discuss it now. But I want to tell you, Kedoshim Tiyu, a person has to learn to be holy. And holy means that you go lifnim mishur. I don't even call it lifnim mishur sadin. It's what the chiyuv on a person is. But a person goes lifnim mishur sadin, that a person goes more above the law at times, where he's careful and he's working on himself, and that he should watch his eyes and guard his eyes and to guard himself. Because Torah can only be accepted in a keli, in a vessel that's ruggle for it, that's capable of housing it. Torah is a very pure and very holy thing, and it can only be put in a case that's valuable and holy and special. And we make ourselves that vessel. Not an easy thing to do, but we create our vessels. We patch our holes in our vessel ourselves. So I give you a bracha that we should become kalim, we should become vessels, and we should be able to, as it says, Barasi Yetzahara, Barasi Torah Tavzin. Hashem said, I created the Yetzirah, but I created the perfect and only medicine for the Yetzirah, which is learning Torah. Torah is the medicine for a person to actually cure any ailment that he has spiritually. And physically too. In the olden days, a person could cure anything with Torah. But physically, but spiritually, any ailment is cured by enough Yigiyasa Torah, enough sweating for Torah, enough putting all your kishkas and effort into your learning of Torah. When a person does that, he sees bracha and he makes himself into the perfect keli. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful week.